Okay, good. So this is your first time with apocalyptic literature. How how is it? How do you feel? How did it feel to read that stuff?
So it feels very allegorical and it feels very reminiscent. Maybe this is done on purpose with the dream that, and maybe I just haven't read enough prophets. Maybe they're all like this. A lot of them are like this, but it feels very reminiscent of not Joseph, Pharaoh's dream of like
Oh, was
the
it
seven
the
cows
stuff? Yes,
consumed.
it's
Like
yes.
this kind of weird allegorical nature seems connected to the idea of like dystopian or the apocalypse.
Yes, definitely. These are dreams anyways, right? So and you're right. The key to understanding these type of things is to go into the Hebrew Bible, and because the way you interpret the concepts is you have to see what they mean if for the Hebrew mindset. It's the Freudian method, right? In the Freudian method, it's what the concept means to you that matters, and then you can decipher. So same thing here. To understand this kind of vision, we have to rely on the imagery that we have already kind of explored in the Hebrew Bible. So very nice. Yes, go ahead. You had a comment, I think.
Yeah, like going through Daniel 7, wasn't it like magical realism in a way?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Yes.
No, reading Daniel 7 is very reminiscent to what it explains in some personal revelation as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like
Revelation is drawing from Daniel. That's why we start with Daniel. You cannot understand Book of Revelation without understanding Daniel. And sadly, many Christians they go around Daniel, right? Yes. Go ahead.
This is just something that I remember learning a long time ago. To quote, it says, "Four great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea." Uh, I know that, well, I learned a while ago that when Moses split the sea, he also split the heavens. The heavens were open, and many of the people saw the heavens split and saw the four animals sitting near the throne of God, and one of which was an ox, and that's actually what gave the inspiration for the sin of the golden calf.
Interesting. Okay.
Interestingly enough, you also see that the the animal that they got inspired from was an ox,
Yes.
and an
Yeah.
ox is the only animal out of all of them that has horns. And you see that the animal that looked like
Has horns too, right?
Yeah.
The beast. Yeah, the last one. Good. Okay. Yes, that makes sense. Okay. Any last comments? Yes, I enjoyed both of you guys are asking the right questions. Very good. So, and I'm going to answer them. So, okay, let's get in the text. So, in the next couple weeks, a couple days rather, in the next couple days, we are entering what I call the empire texts. And then after that, we will do what I call the kingdom texts. So the empire text is to give us a sense of the world we live in now. We live in empire, right? Especially in this country. This is empire in the sense of Star Wars, right? So we live in empires, whether we're in Europe or here or anywhere. It is the empire mentality. On my trip, I was visiting Dubai. Dubai is interesting. I don't know, it's gorgeous, and at the same time you sense the influence. The Babel mentality is there too, right? They have the highest tower, I think the highest building in the world. So same thing, right? You have this everywhere you go now is the empire, right? Mentality. So we need to understand this mentality. We need to be able to decipher it. We need to be able to discern it, and also we need to be able to resist it. And that's what the book of Daniel is going to teach us. How do we live in a subversion of the empire mentality? So let's review the empire mentality really quick. It's the Tower of Babel that we studied. I'll go over really quickly the key elements of Babel. Tower to the heavens, there is the desire to be like God. There is this notion, we are now the highest authority. You submit to us. There is nothing higher than us. You see this everywhere, by the way. You see this, I mean, this notion of submission, and we'll look historically what it looked like, but still today, right? You have some nations that demand complete surrender. Nothing should be higher than that. You have that. Then you have the mortar and the bricks. Who was it that gave me this beautiful interpretation of slavery? Was it, who was it that interpreted the mortar and the bricks? I can't remember. Somebody really gave a brilliant interpretation in this class of the mortar and the bricks, having to do, referring to Egypt, right? Where they were also making bricks. And so the illusion is the oppression, right? So this is a system which is going to be oppressive. There's going to be a dimension of oppression in Babel. Number 3, the oneness. Who was it? Do you remember?
Yeah, one of the themes.
One of those girls. Okay. They're very, very discreet. They're being humble. Okay. I don't remember who it was. Third point, the oneness, the totalitarian aspect, right? Babel wanted one language, one people, no dissent, no nothing that goes against, you know, the regime, the regime's ideology. Nothing can dissent, right? Good. Those are some of the features, right? The notion of making a name for ourselves, right? There is no God. We make the name. So this is the Babel mentality, which we are going to discern now in the context of this journey through empires that we're about to take. Now, okay. So Daniel is interesting. Let's talk a little bit about Daniel as a person before we get into the actual text. So the history is very important here because you have to understand what's the backdrop of these visions. Let's review. So we left off, we never really studied the kings of Israel, right? We kind of, you know, we'd studied the conquest of Canaan, but then, you know, we left it at that. But you had several kings, right? And then you had the north. The 10 northern tribes were conquered by Assyria. This is Nineveh that we studied in the book of Jonah, destroyed, completely decimated the 10 tribes. Nobody knows anything about those tribes anymore. They were completely assimilated. They're gone, right? Now, Judah, the last tribe, was still functioning with a king in the southern part of the kingdom. They still hadn't been conquered, but when Babylon decided to conquer it with the king Nebuchadnezzar, who is mentioned here, what they did is they conquered. They didn't destroy. I don't think did they destroy the temple. Who is historically more connected to me? Didn't destroy the temple. I think that first time, but they took all the vessels from the temple. So what's the meaning of that? When you take when you plunder a temple, what are you saying? Yeah.
You're removing its value.
You what?
You're removing its value, the attachment to, like what was inside the temple, the basins and the scrolls and all of that. What gave value to the temple.
Yes. So what is the king saying when he plunders the temple? What is he telling the Hebrews when he does that?
Their God.
It's like, exactly, your God is finished. I'm your God now, right? And indeed, Nebuchadnezzar saw himself as a God. If you read the whole book, right, you see that he behaves as a God. He wants a big statue erected in his name, and then he wants people to bow down to this statue. So he has a God complex. So when he plunders the temple, he's basically saying, I have defeated your God. I am now your God. This is important. So the God of Israel is finished. Temple is destroyed. There's no, and Israel is defeated. This is the message, the message we get, right? That everybody is getting is the God of Israel has been defeated. He's finished. No more God, right? So, and then the Hebrews are captured now, not all of them, only the elites. So the princes, the kings were brought into Babylon. They were castrated, the males, and then some of them were assimilated into the court. The rest, the peasants, they stayed, and then they sent other people there to intermingle them and destroy, right? This is a form of ethnic cleansing. Intermingle them with other nations, they're gone. No more insurrection, right? So the elites are brought into Babylon, and Daniel is part of this elite. He's a prince. And they are, him and his 3 friends are castrated, most likely. We don't know for sure, but most likely because he's part of the court of the eunuchs. So what is that? Right? And then he is fully assimilated into the culture. He is educated as to become a wise man, right? He was going to be a high functionary in the court, but that nevertheless submitted, right? And then he becomes a wise man, right? An astrologer, basically, becomes astrologer / wise man in the court of Nebuchadnezzar, right? Nebuchadnezzar knew that it's good to bring in talent, right? It's good to bring in talent. It's good to, but this talent has to surrender to the king, right? So the way that they surrendered them, 2 ways, food and change of name. It's interesting. We're going to look at that. The significance of them eating at the king's table. There is deep meaning of that. Why? What does it mean to eat at the king's table? And then they change their names. What does it mean to change the names? Let's stop on that a little bit. What does it mean with someone? Yeah. Exactly. They don't even have Hebrew names anymore. Now they have Babylonian names. Babylonian names, which each of them contains the name of a Babylonian god, right? So they're fully assimilated at this point, right? So they survive, they resist. We see that if you read the whole book, which hope you should do tonight, they resist in different ways, not overtly, right? They're captives, they're slaves, but they resist. For example, they tweak their names in order, and they take out the divinity part. So it's a kind of distorted version of the name they were given. And then we're going to see at the end of class today how they resist with regards to food. This is very important. Good. Okay. So so that's the backdrop, right? We need to be very clear. The backdrop is the God of Israel is defeated. It's over. The temple is plundered. Later, the temple will be destroyed when they, I think the remaining Hebrews rebelled at one point, and then Nebuchadnezzar was like, okay, now I'm mad. And he destroys the temple completely, right? So it will only be rebuilt later, much later. So this is the end of God, the end of Israel. And in this context, and the triumph of empire. And the people of God are made, how shall I put it, helpless, right? Now, it's interesting that as Daniel lived several years there, when he turns, many years later, he begins to have visions. And what we're going to see with these visions is the assertion, or we're going to decipher in these visions, we're going to see in these visions a God who is in control not only of Israel, but of cosmic history, right? The idea here, those visions have a cosmic flavor. They're not just visions about Daniel. They're not just dreams about his own life. They're not even dreams about his own people. They're cosmic dreams. And you know this through the repetition throughout the visions of the number 4, right? We saw this, 4 beasts, 4 winds of heaven. The number 4 comes up. Now, what does the number 4 mean? Anybody know? Number 4.
My favorite.
Okay, good. 4 winds, 4 corners of the earth, 4 winds of the earth. What sense do you get from these 4? Yeah.
Wrong, but probably destruction or apocalyptic.
No. When you
Fourth day, the sun and moon were created, I think. Right?
okay, so that gives it a cosmic. That's interesting, actually. I hadn't thought of that. No, but seriously, yeah, if you're right, then it's perfect. It works. Yeah.
Wasn't it what we talked about the force of chaos?
So definitely they come out of water. So we're gonna look at the animals, right, in a second. But for now, let's just focus on the general backdrop. We'll get there. And you have water, yes, which is chaos. So 4, when you think 4 winds of heaven, 4 corners of the earth, what's the scope here?
Order.
No, 4 corners of the earth. What's the scope?
Everything.
Everything. Okay, you got it, right? So the text is basically when it's using the number 4 over and over again, if you do a dream interpretation, 4 means cosmic. And if you were right about the sun and the moon, I have to check, then that enhances this, right? Because the sun and the moon rule over the whole world. They're cosmic entities, right? Okay, yes.
4 seasons.
Exactly, 4 seasons. So number 4, right? 4, exactly. Number 4 is a cause. So when what you're going to see here is a God who reveals himself not only as in full control. We're going to see this in the images of the thrones, right? There's God is seated on the throne, meaning he is still ruling, right? Even though the temple is destroyed, the people are castrated, God is still on the throne, right? Not only is the God this is not only about the fate of the Hebrews, right, who are in exile. This is about the fate of the world. And this is why these texts, Book of Daniel, is classified as wisdom literature. It's not part of the religious corpus. It's wisdom literature, meaning it's part of the literature that the nations should be reading, right? Remember, did we talk about wisdom literature? How wisdom literature is supposed to be subversive, rebellious, human-centered, and is supposed to be cosmic. It's the books in the Bible that were written for the nations, not just for the Hebrews. So Book of Daniel is a book that the nations should be reading. This book is our inheritance here in Queens. This book was written for the broader audience than just believers, right? Everybody should be reading and studying assiduously Book of Daniel, right? Good. Okay, so we have that's the backdrop, right? So make sure you have jotted down, right, that the visions reveal a God who is still in control, seated on the throne, and it reveals a cosmic God, right? Who is the concern of the visions is cosmic history, not just the history of the Hebrews. Okay, so now let's get into what he's seeing. This is the most striking vision in Daniel 7. Okay, so it starts, right? So let's go there together. Daniel 7, the vision opens with 4 winds of heaven, right? In my vision at night, I looked, and before me were the 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. Okay, so we have 4 winds cosmic, the sea chaos, and then he says 4 great beasts, right? Each different from the others came up out of the sea. Okay, so we know these 4 beasts. So we have to understand, first of all, what does beasts mean in the context of the Hebrew mindset? Does anybody know? So when you contrast beast with human, what's the meaning here, right? What do the beasts represent? Yes.
I mean, in a literal sense, I guess the beasts represent the land creatures.
Okay, very good. So it's land creatures, and they're different from humans, right? They're lower, more savage, right? So humans represent something and beasts represent something, right? What do you think they represent? Yeah.
I think beast is more like chaotic, like they don't have rules or limitations.
Okay, very good. No limitation, savagery, chaos, right? So it's forces that have no limitation, that are savage, that are chaotic. What else? Nicolopoulos, you had something?
I mean, I just wanna see like power.
Power, very good.
Yeah.
Power, right? Now, if you're familiar with the Hebrew context, the beasts represented pagan power, pagan nations. They were, and it's a little bit unpolitically correct, right? So I hear you coming already, being towards me, right? But the beasts represented the pagan nations, right? Why? Because the beast is not connected to God. The beast walks on all fours, right? So the beast is kind of disconnected. The human, on the other hand, is vertical, is connected to God. And so the Hebrews saw themselves as the human, or anybody who is connected to God is a human, is standing upright, is connected to the Creator. The beasts, on the other hand, are the nations that do not know God, right? They are horizontal. They're walking on all fours. They don't have this vertical component. So when you see a beast, you know he's talking about pagan power, also talking about cruelty, no limitations. These are the pagan powers that surround Daniel, right? Okay. Now, let's look at each one of these beasts. They come one after the other. So there is a kind of chronology. So let's try to decipher what is the first beast. First beast is a lion with wings. If you know a little bit of archaeology and history, you know exactly who the lion with wings, and you should know, represents. Lion with wings.
David?
Nope, no.
Greeks.
Nope.
Chimera. What's chimera?
They don't have, it's actually the easiest one to decipher because it's actually archaeologically verifiable. The image of the lion with wings. Now remember, yes, why though? Let me draw you a picture.
What did it say?
Babylon.
Yes,
Babylon?
for Babylon. If you go to Babylonian architecture, I'm gonna give it my best try here. But it's not helping. Does this make sense? Okay, lion with wings if you go in the iconography, if you go, are you gonna take a picture of my lion with wings?
Yeah.
Open on your phone's lion with wings. Let me see if I can do it. We'll have a better version of this. Phone is steadily dying. Lion with wings. There we go. Oh, somebody mentioned griffin in the winged lion. And then type next to it Babylon, okay? Because now you'll get the real version here. Here it is. Do you see it? Okay, right, exactly. Okay, show everybody. This is good, right? Lion with wings is part of the Babylonian architecture, right? It's a very, very vivid symbol of Babylon. They used to build, right, or carve out on their walls and facades lions with wings. And you should know because you're Persian Jew, right? Both of you. You are Persian Jews, yes.
Aren't griffins Greek? No, so like.
I see what you're saying,
That's
yeah.
where my mind.
Yeah. So they maybe later borrowed from there, right? But the original version is Babylonian, right? Did you look it up? Were you able
Yeah,
to look it up? Okay, good. All right, so this is the first kingdom, first empire, Babylon, the one where Daniel is, right? Now it's interesting because the vision will stretch beyond Daniel's time. Second beast is a bear, right? Raised up on one of its sides with ribs in its mouth. Okay, now the bear. So this is a power kingdom that comes right after Babylon in the context of Daniel, right? So we're not talking about China or India or whatever. In the context of Daniel, does anybody know which kingdom, if you know a little bit of ancient history, came after the Babylonians? And even in the story of Daniel, you have this succession happening. Yeah. Persia, very good, right? So Persia, even during Daniel's time, Persia took over. They conquered Babylon. And in fact, the king Cyrus, who helped rebuild Jerusalem, was Persian, right? He wasn't Babylonian. And Daniel was still alive at that time, right? No, not for Cyrus, but when the Persians first conquered, he was still alive. So Persia is the next kingdom, and Persia is indeed a very powerful kingdom that came historically after Babylon, right? Now,
Which piece is this?
the bear, the bear. And okay, we have, of course, it's hard to find it's, we can trace historically, but I have just one little quote there to give some evidence of that. In the Talmud, right, you have this quote, the Persian eats and drinks like the bear, has hair like the bear, and is agitated like the bear. So the ancient rabbis understood the bear. And by the way, I'm giving here the rabbinic interpretation of Daniel, right? I'm following that traditional interpretation. So the rabbis understood the bear to allude to the Persians, right? So, okay. Now, the fourth animal is a leopard, very fast, with 4 wings and 4 heads. Now, its empire comes right after Persia. In that region, anybody know what empire came after Persia? You studied well, did you?
Just remember this from like years ago in church.
Okay, I know,
Is it
church does
Greece?
Greece, very good, right? Greece. Now, you have the 4 repeated twice here with the leopard, 4 wings, 4 heads. This has to do with, this is a kingdom which is going to be cosmic, universal. And the Greeks are the ones that really conquered in terms of space. They went much further than Babylon and Persia. They conquered all over to India, all the way, right? In fact, Alexander the Great, who went all the way there, he went all the way to India, and Aristotle was his tutor, and Aristotle went all the way with him, right? So Greece, right, is different from the others in terms of its scope. The others are still very local powers, right? They stay in the region of Babylon. Greece is the first one who really begins to branch to kind of like broaden its territory, broaden its scope, and aims for the whole world, right? I mean, Greece went all the way to Egypt. You're familiar with Cleopatra, right? She's Greek. I just found that out. I was like, what? She's actually a Greek sovereign that they put there. And also, of course, so all the way to Egypt was Greek. Then of course, Palestine was Greek. The land of Israel became Greek, all the way to in the Indus Valley, right? So so the number 4, right? I think that's the best, is a way to show the cosmic scope of that empire, right? Okay. So far, so good. This interpretation attested by the ancient rabbis. I'm still following the tradition. Now, the fourth beast is characterized by its cruelty. Iron teeth, devours everything. This is a very powerful and cruel barbaric kingdom. Which kingdom came after the Greeks, was cruel, barbaric, destroyed everything on its path? Rome, right? So now we're with Rome. Okay, so Daniel clearly writes, so now many interpreters are like, oh, he can't have seen that far, therefore Daniel was written during the Greeks. Okay, you can say that, or you can take it seriously and see there, a prophet who might very well have had a vision of the future, right? Not without knowing what it meant, right? He's just looking at beasts. We can now go back and look and be like, oh, that, right? Means this, means this, means this. So Rome comes, devours everything. I mean, this is the beast that he is focusing on. And in fact, the ancient rabbis also interpreted the fourth beast as Rome. Rome was, I mean, you see, if you're a Christian, you know the power of Rome, how it functioned, because you saw how Jesus was treated by the Romans, right? I mean, this was a power which they would line up. I mean, Jesus was not the only one crucified. They would line up the streets with crosses and kill people and let them kind of, rot on the cross, right? So they were incredibly, they used torture. They were, they were trying to crush. The Greeks were trying to civilize. The Romans were trying to crush, right? So they would be incredibly violent militarily. The metal, by the way, which characterizes their army is iron. They're the ones who developed weapons of iron, whereas the Greeks, actually that's the other vision, but it's, and you see here this notion of, yeah, it's the statue, right? So we have a parallel vision, by the way, in Daniel 2, same 4, number 4 and so forth. So you can go look at the parallel vision if you want. Okay, so now, okay, so far so good, very interesting. Any questions so far before we get into the horn that pops out of the fourth beast? All good? Everyone with me? Okay, now, what intrigues Daniel now is not just the appearance of this horn, which of course a horn means a kingdom, political power, emerges out of Rome, right? This is a political, what intrigues and what troubles Daniel is that this horn, this political power has a face. Now, you should know immediately what it means to have a face and the contrast with the beasts. What is this power like? It has human features. It's not a beast anymore. What does it represent? I mentioned this already.
As in like a real world thing or like concept
Concept.
stated?
No, it has a face. Remember, we talked about beasts and human beings, the difference in the Jewish psyche, in the Hebrew psyche. The beasts are the pagan nations, the human is vertical. Therefore, there's a connection to God. If the horn has a human face, and that's why Daniel is horrified, what does it mean? Yeah. You know too much.
I mean, I'm assuming that there would be some type of, I guess, assimilation between that uprightness, as well as this position of the beast.
Okay, so it's rising out of the beast, but it has a human face. And that is what disturbs Daniel. Yes.
To say like person that looks like is a person but acts basically like.
So yes, so just going basically, what does it mean when you have human features? How is it different from the beasts? How is this political or power different from the beasts? Yeah.
Like blindsided.
Remember, not for us humans are confused, they're trash. But at the time, the human being, remember, is the beast is on all fours, doesn't know God. The human being, vertical, standing upright, knows God, right?
He has the capacity to know God, but he rejects it.
Exactly. So we'll see. This is a religious power. This is why and it's in his mind, it's Israel or whatever. Right? He sees the danger. He's disturbed, right? He's disturbed because he's seeing that this is a power which is about to do some terrible things, and yet it is a religious power, right? And for Daniel, he's the only one. He's disturbed because he's saying, wait a second, are we going to turn into this? Are we about to And that's why he doesn't eat, he doesn't drink, he doesn't sleep when he sees this, right? It's a religious political power. It's a religious, not political, but it's a religious power that emerges after Rome. Now, what does this power do? Let's make a list, and then we'll try to identify. So let me, yes.
I just have a quick question.
Mm.
I might be completely wrong, but this is referencing something that happens later in Daniel where Nebuchadnezzar is becomes
Yes,
mad at
yes,
his mind.
yes.
I don't know, it reminds me of that in a sense.
Absolutely, right? Nebuchadnezzar loses his mind at one point and he's a beast walking on all fours, right? And the interpretation is, and it's right after he proclaimed himself God. And God is like, oh, really? Well, watch what's about to happen next, right? He loses even his humanity, right? So on all fours means no connection whatsoever to God, upright human connection to God, right? So this power, make sure you jot this down. The fact that it has a human face, the contrast with the beast is saying, out of this pagan power, Rome, a religious power will emerge, which will be deeply problematic. Okay, let's look at what it will do. Number one, it will speak. Who speaks? Who is the first person to speak? No, God, right? You're speaking. At that moment, we are thinking, right? It's a human feature, number one. So it's i.e. religious, right? Number two, it's an attribute of God to speak, right? When God creates the world, he's speaking. Okay. It will oppress the saints, right? It will oppress the people of God. And then it's an interesting thing. It will change the time and the laws. It will change the times and the laws. Let's focus on this a little bit. Who's in control of the times and the laws? God, right? God, you're gonna stop answering now. You already took this lesson somewhere. Right. Who's in control of time? And how do we know this? Who's in control of time? Yes. How do we know this?
Planets and stuff, like planets and like. movements of it.
Okay, so God created the seasons or whatever. So God is holding. Are we in control of time? That's the only thing that's out of our control, right? We can control space to a certain degree, but time, just forget about it. Right? So we are not in control of time, right? And there's a verse, other evidence that God is in control of time, that God sets the times. What does it mean? What God is setting the times? What's it alluding to?
I want it.
Can't talk. No.
No, I vote.
All right, fine. Go ahead.
No, it's fine.
I thought you had something you wanted to say.
If you have evidence, it's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Just that there's multiple parts that mentions that God appoints things at different times.
Yes. Okay. So that's a great answer, right? Right. God appoints things at different times, right? Is the creation story, right? And God, right, creates the days and so forth. And then you have this beautiful text, I think, in the Psalms where I think King David says, "My times are in your hands," right? So this is the element that God controls, right? What about laws?
So could I offer counter to the
Yeah.
science thing? So there's there's a field of thought, and some people say that God controls sometimes when it comes to times of holidays and stuff.
Yeah.
The people are responsible for that, and that God still makes the stars and controls the movement of these heavenly bodies, but in terms of appointing the times for the actual holidays, it's up to the people to go out and be witnesses and look at the sky
Yeah.
and decide what the times are going to be.
But he appointed
Yeah.
when we figure out
Yeah.
if it is the time, but he appointed this at this time, the 14th of whatever, it's this month, Nisan, right? It's Passover.
Yeah.
God appoints that,
But
right?
there's a difference in the language used, like Sachs points out, and again, this could just be his view. I'm not sure how popular this is, but there's a difference in the prayers we say for the Sabbath. We say this is God makes us holy versus that's how the prayer ends. And then the prayer we say for Passover, we say God makes Israel holy, and then they determine.
Okay, yeah, because it's a moon thing, right? The Sabbath is not a moon thing, so it's every 7 day, blah blah blah. But the Passover, you have to have the right moon phase because it's not they don't follow the normal calendar. So, and that's only people can do that, right? Absolutely, but it's still set. The moon moment is set. Yes, go ahead. You had a question?
I'm just, maybe I'm jumping to a conclusion, but the small horn represent the coming of Jesus? Like,
So we're not there yet. We don't know yet. We're looking at the elements first, and then we're gonna try to decipher who is this horn, right? Okay, who sets the laws? Okay, okay, so horn is taking over prerogative, divine prerogative, right? It's messing with holy time, and it's messing with divine law, right? So it's a horn that's trying to put itself in the place of God, right? Okay, so it's, and then of course you have the number, a time, half a time, but time, times, and half a time. Okay, here it says different. Here in the text, it says it will oppress for how long? Anybody see it? How is it written in your?
For times of time and half a time, something like that.
Yeah, time. It will oppress for a time, for times, and half a time. So this is a time. A total of so 1 times is 2, 3, so a total of 3.5 years. Okay. Now, again, this is symbolic. Don't take it literally. Don't take nothing literally here. Okay. 3.5 years. We have seen this. If you know your Bible very well, you have seen this time frame already. Anybody know when? I didn't even know. I read about it. So if you don't know, it's okay. There was a time of famine that lasted 3.5 years. Anybody know when and who was the prophet at the time? In Israel, yes.
I could be wrong, but was it Elijah?
It was Elijah, right? During the time of Elijah. You're good. Protestant, right? Catholic?
No.
Evangelical.
Downtown.
Same thing. Protestants learn their Bible very well. I can see that. Very good. During the time of Elijah, there was a famine, and also God receded for 3.5 years. So this has to do with famine, spiritual famine, right? No, it's not a literal 3.5 years. It's simply a time which would be like experience like a spiritual and material famine, or rather spiritual famine. Everything is symbolic. So it's not a real famine, it's a spiritual famine. All right, let's try now to give an identity to this horn. So you got this, right? Coming out of Rome, after Rome chronologically, oppressive, usurpative of divine power, messing with laws, messing with times, and it's a time of spirit, brings in a time of spiritual famine. In jeopardy, who am I? Let's hear you.
I feel like to this we might have different interpretations.
We can.
Depending on
We can.
what denomination.
We can do this. Absolutely. We can totally do this. If you're I'm open to any interpretation as long as it fits the criteria. So bring it on. Let's hear it.
I was going to say, I think Ariel was leaning in this direction, like the Holy Roman Empire and like the influence of Christianity arising from Rome.
Okay, very good, right? Christianity, remember, Daniel, of course, can't foresee this, but Christianity is spiritual. It has the features, the human features that Daniel was so worried about. He thought it would be, and it is. Christianity is an offshoot of Judaism, right? So this is a continuation of Judaism, which somehow went terribly wrong at this point of time in history, right? And it is emerging out of Rome, right? It's true. So that's one interpretation. Any others? Yes.
want to add on to that, and then it goes on to say, in my vision that night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. So a son, or somebody's son, that will speak.
Careful, this is a good guy. This is a good guy. Don't mix them up with it. This is a vision of God here, right? This is coming up. This is not the horn. This is, be careful when you read.
Right after.
No, but it's an
Right
interlude.
after.
Yeah, it's an interlude. It's not, you have this vision and then you have this interlude of the vision of heaven, right? And that's where he sees this Son of Man, right? Which, by the way, is not a Christian concept. It's a Jewish concept. If you read the book of Enoch, which is a Jewish book, you have this notion of the Son of Man described in very similar terms. This was in the context of First Temple Judaism. Second Temple Judaism was a figure of a messianic figure, right? So this is very, very familiar vision, right? This is a vision, a messianic vision, which you see here, you see in the book of Enoch, and then of course Christianity is gonna build on this.
I think Christianity, because of the first point that it will speak, like
Yeah.
Jesus speaking to his disciples, and you have changed time and laws, the way years are counted are now changed, right? It starts from the birth of Jesus. So
Yes,
and then laws, you change Judaism into Christianity. And then the oppression part would, I mean, that would be further down like the Crusades.
Yeah,
Christian-
let's look at that, right? Change of times and laws. Christianity does mess with times, right? You have certain specific holidays, and Christianity is gonna shift things a little bit. Anybody know where Christianity shifted the time, the holidays or sacred festivals? Anybody know how the times were shifted? There's a big one that got shifted. You would know because you're working on this. Sunday, right? You have the seventh-day Sabbath moving into Sunday. That's messing with the times, right? What about the laws? I see all the Christians looking really, really worried. Oh, that's
The
yes.
answer,
Go ahead.
I know, there's several, especially like, well, there's multiple laws that, are, I guess, left out.
Yep. Lady also, right, Paul?
613 sometimes.
Yes, yes, less even, right? So you have a shift also in the laws, right? You have, especially with Paul. Well, Paul, yeah, with Paul, I think a lot of laws are set aside, right? So you have, and of course, so you have, right? You have the Christianity messing a little bit with the times and the laws, and then you have this. Okay, any other interpretations? Christians, defend your turf.
Walk with the Sabbath king.
All depends on which domination.
Okay, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm open to other interpretations. Yes, no, no. Any other interpretation? It's hard to not see that, right? Now, anything else? Really? That's it? Nicolopoulos? Struggling? And you? You
I'm
okay?
just thinking, trying to
He's
grab-
a Protestant, he doesn't care. It's difficult text, right? Okay, so let's some interpreters have seen Islam also, the violence of Islam, the conquest of the conquering of Islam, the change of days, right? Also from Saturday to Friday. So you have elements. So some commentators see their Islam. The fact that it comes out of Rome points even a little more strongly to Christianity, right? The rising Christianity. No, this is Christianity in its early stage, right? Let's look at Christianity at the time. It has nothing to do with how Christianity is practiced now. How did Christianity fit this profile at the time? If you know the history, you would be able to decipher this.
As in what?
As Rome, as it emerges out of Rome. What's going on? Anybody know a little bit what happened? How did it emerge out of Rome? I mean, it was persecuted by Rome. I don't know if you recall, right? Yes,
Well, didn't one of the emperors, maybe it was Justinian, when he became Christian?
yes, I thought it was Constantine, but right, so
I heard that Constantine, like he himself converted to Christianity, but I think she's right in saying Justinian was the one who made it.
official.
Propagate
Yeah,
Christianity.
very good, right? Because Christianity didn't start out like this, right? Christianity started out, first of all, started out Jewish, let's be clear. And then little by little, it's separated, right? But Christians were persecuted by Rome. They were thrown to the lions, right? Much more than Jews, they were persecuted by Rome, right? They were regular feed for the lions of the circus. How did we get, right? But then you have little by little Christianity becoming, through the conversion of Constantine and later, what's his name? Justinian,
Justinian, yeah.
right? Little by little, these emperors somehow they genuinely, I think Constantine genuinely converted to the degree that he could convert. And right, he went, he didn't convert, but he had, he had a moment. But then Christianity becomes the official religion of Rome. Now you have an unholy merging, right, between the barbaric power of Rome and the human featured influence of Christianity. And at that moment, things begin to go south historically, right? Christianity becomes more and more totalitarian, more and more, what's the word? Intolerant of others, right? This is the moment when the Crusades arrive on the scene. This is the moment when you have the Inquisition, right? In a way, Christianity has faltered at that point, right? And you have this oppression that, I mean, I went once to Colombia. Did I tell you my time in Colombia when I went to the Museum of the Inquisition? First of all, I was surprised there was a Museum of the Inquisition. I'm all the way in Colombia. I thought the Inquisition was in Spain. So I'm in Colombia and I see this Museum of the Inquisition. I'm like, what, here too? So I go in and I'm curious, like, there's no Jews in, like, where are the Jews, right? I thought Inquisition was about Jews. No, actually, Inquisition was anyone who didn't fit the mold of Christianity, witches, women who was healers, right? Native Americans, anybody who didn't squeeze into this mold of Christianity was destroyed, tortured, right? And there was a next to it museum of torture. It was exquisite. So you have, right, the Inquisition went all the way to Latin America, right? And so you have this vision of what the people of God were going to become. And that's why Daniel is so disturbed, because he sees himself as part of this movement, right? Of course, he doesn't know about Christianity, Jesus, or nothing, but he sees a face. And for him, that's him. That's the Hebrews, the Jews, right? Of course, it became, right, it went, so this is where we are, a very, very difficult text to swallow, especially if you come from a Christian background, right? But remember, the people of God have nothing to do with the institution of the church, right? This is a very condemning passage of what the church became. The church, of course, was not only that, right? Even you had people in the church that were good, but you had the church as an institution allying itself with Rome and using Rome in order to conquer the world, right? And that's why you have this a warning, right? This is a warning to Christianity. Let's be careful. And you can read there Islam also. I think Islam comes chronologically after Rome. It doesn't emerge directly out of Rome, but it's the same profile. You could read this generally as any power which allies itself with empire, right? Any spiritual community which allies itself with empire is going to turn into this, right? So we can broaden the interpretation. We can keep it very particularistic and look at mostly Christianity as falling into this trap. But you can see this more broadly as any religious community which allies itself with empire is going to look like this. And now you can see much more of this. Any examples of religious worldview aligning itself, partnering with empire and giving rise to this? Anybody have? So we have the example of Islam. It works very well. The conquering Islam, right? Who else? Who else is doing this? Many people doing this. There's one more culprit. We bash the Christians, we bash the Muslims. Who's left, guys? All right, the Jews. How is Judaism also vulnerable to this? Let's look very, very let's look carefully.
If I were to look at it from a Christian perspective, the horn could be the rejectors or the torturers of Jesus, or the people that him and his disciples had to press up against before Christianity came into its standing. Kind of force the Pharisees that have this legitimizing force of no, we're still the people of God, that use their influence to be this persecuting force to the messenger of God.
Because it's true that the Jews did persecute the Christians, right? Oh, that's interesting. I'll take it. Yeah. So we know this from the writings of Paul, right? So right after, so it's out of Rome, right? It's in alliance with, oh, this is good. It's an alliance with Rome because, of course, the Jewish leaders partnered with Rome in the crucifixion of Jesus, and they partner with Rome in the persecution of the early church. So you can see that absolutely, that as soon as a power as soon as a religion begins to use or begins to align itself with empire methodology, it's going to become like this. So I like that, sure. Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
So,
I don't know, like you're saying how religion falters.
yeah, as soon as religion aligns itself with empire or with empire mentality, right? It will have these features.
I was thinking about the Second Temple, how like, the people, the the Second Temple was destroyed upon itself, like it was, it unfolded on itself. If the Jews were aligned with each other and there was no hierarchy, there wouldn't be the destruction, and they could have defended easily.
Yes, the fact that the Jews were in turmoil internally brought about the destruction of, made them vulnerable, right, to enemies.
Yeah.
No, I was looking of, yeah, no, we have the three, right? So you can jot down this can be particular interpretation, or it can be a paradigm. it can be a warning to other religions too, right? Which I think the text is broad enough to include other religions, right? There is this danger. Now, here's the question, of course, is how do we resist, right? We are in the empire, right? We are, of course, this is still early, right? This is not now. We're going to look at now later when we look at the book of Revelation. But here we already see the danger of religion becoming allying, partnering with empire, right? As soon as you have a mix, this is very important. I'm going to come back to this idea. As soon as you have a mix between spiritual worldview and empire worldview, right? As soon as religion is mixing with the political, you have the danger of the little horn, right? And this is true in Islam, in Christianity, and in Judaism. And last time I taught you, right, we went over right now, contemporary movements, right, of this alliance that is happening right now in the three religions, right? I went, and you can go back to your notes. We saw this right now in Christian nationalism. We saw this in religious Zionism, and we saw this feature in Messianic, or what, how did I call it? For Islam, what was it? Eschatological Islam, right? So right now we are already witnessing this partnership. These partnerships are taking place again. And we know when the partnership takes place, it's going to start looking like this horn. The face is allied with the horn. And you will have, this will be the result, spiritual famine, the usurpation of God, right? The oppression of people. Oppression always follows when religion mingles with the political. That is the recipe for oppression, right? So everybody got that, right? Any questions? Any questions or comments or pushbacks? You know, there are many ways these texts should be interpreted as broadly as possible, right? But any questions or pushbacks? Okay, how do we resist? Daniel 1. So I have 5 minutes to talk about resistance, right? As these things take place, as these marriages take place between religion and political power, and as, you know, you have elements of oppression starting to arise, you have elements of usurpation starting to arise, you have spiritual famine. How do we, as individuals, resist, right? Okay, this is a great story. So the king, of course, castrates everybody, changes their names. There's things we cannot resist. There's things we cannot, right? There are moments we cannot fight back. But there's a really interesting moment where the king tells them, you will eat at my table. And there's a symbolism to that. What does it mean when he says, you will eat from now on at my table? Sounds nice, right? Eat at the table of the king. It's an honor. Why not? Right? Good food. What is the meaning of that? There's a deeper underlying meaning. Yes. Okay, so first of all, right, the meal represents a covenant. That's true. That would be okay. But there's a deeper issue here than just a covenant is okay. I want to be friends. Let's be friends. But there's wars going on. Yes.
It's like submission and acceptance.
How?
Because like when there's a power dynamic, they're accepting the invitation of somebody that has the power over you. And then especially in terms of like the Jewish context of like kosher food, like you're submitting, you're giving up your identity, you're submitting to somebody who has power over you, and you're saying, I'm willing to do whatever you tell me.
So very good. So the food, they have to give up, of course, their kosher, right? So now you're giving up a part of your identity. There's even more going on. Yes.
It just reminds me of like when you would get in trouble in like elementary school or something, and the teacher would put your desk right in front of theirs.
Okay. Yes. There's a kind of surveillance, right? You're here. But there's worse. Who is the first person to give us food in the Bible? God. Watch what Daniel does. What does he do?
Rejects the
So he rejects the food.
yeah.
What diet does he opt for? It's interesting.
Vegetarian.
Vegetarian. Why? He's not a vegetarian, right? Why is he choosing to be a vegetarian? There's practical and metaphysical reasons for this. What's the practical reason that he chooses to be a vegetarian?
So the practical reason, I had a friend ask about, I've had lots of people talk about this, but it's like, you'll notice this among traditional Jews where like, even if you don't keep kosher, you might avoid, and you going to a place that you know is unkosher, you'll still avoid the meat, and you'll just
Very
eat the
good.
vegetable option,
Right?
because that's the next best thing.
So remember, a Jew is supposed to eat kosher, meaning the animal needs to be killed in a certain way, animal needs to be very clean. This is impossible here. right? So many Jews, when they travel, they just turn vegetarian because there's no risk. I'm not going to eat this meat. So it's practical reason. That way he can still be Jewish, right? But there's a deeper metaphysical reason. Yes.
He basically says that you aren't my God, and when God first gave us food, it was vegetable only.
Very good. That's the allusion. He's alluding back to the creation story when we were eating, right? So this is not about, vegetarian manifesto. It is an allusion to the creation story, although that would be nice. Allusion to the creation story. Eating vegetables is something that the people did in the creation story, and that God gave us this food, right? So what Daniel is saying is, I'm not taking my food from you. I'm taking my food from God. What does it mean? What's he actually saying? Yeah.
He's showing that he still sees, the God of Israel as God instead of Nebuchadnezzar.
Exactly. That's his way of resisting. He's saying, no, not only I take my sustenance from God, but I take my orders from God. That's what he's basically saying, right? He's by keeping this diet, symbolic way of saying, my authority is not you, my authority is God. I receive my sustenance and and I submit to, right, this God, right? So that's his way. So now, how do we extrapolate that, right? We're not Jews, so, but we're all called, of course, to resist, right? Whether we're Jewish or not. So what does it mean? How can we incorporate this practice in our own way? What does it mean for us, right? What would it look like for us to practice in this way? Yes.
Not bowing to oppressive systems or regimes.
How do you not bow? Because remember, the regimes are saying, if you don't bow, you can't eat. We had this during COVID, not to be conspiracy theorist or one of those, but you could not go you could go nowhere without the vaccine. You couldn't go to work. You couldn't go into supermarkets. I mean, your whole life depended on this vaccine, right? If you didn't apply, right, and do this, you can go to school, you couldn't, right? So it's a very similar situation, right? If you don't submit, you can't survive, right? So how would we practice this? Yes.
Well, it doesn't answer your question. I'm gonna say like power is not real from a human perspective.
Explain what you mean by
It's
that.
like if Daniel was not aligning with this person's way of life or doing it, like maybe you shouldn't submit to somebody's like you shouldn't align to somebody's idea of power because it's not real.
Okay, I like that. Daniel's basically saying like, yeah, you made a big show here, but God is still on the throne,
'Cause
right?
it's not- it's-
Exactly, right? So there's always a way to resist. Notice he doesn't make a big fuss, right? He's not trying to conquer Babylon. He's not an activist. He's just trying to maintain himself. I'm going to keep my integrity best way I can, right? So there's a notion of keeping the integrity, right? How else could we extrapolate this for ourselves in the other ways? Okay, good. So summarize, right? Make sure you jot down, right? Then the idea here is not only to be faithful to one's identity, it's the notion of allegiance. This is a gesture which signifies allegiance. I take my nourishment from God. I depend on God. I don't need you, right? I don't need you to nourish me, right? This is a gesture of allegiance. He maintains his allegiance in the best way he can. I mean, remember, he's completely assimilated. He lost his name. He lost his, even body. He's studying astrology, right? But he is going to still take a stance in that context, an imperfect stance. It's a very small, imperfect stance, but it's something in him that's not going to budge, right? When you live in empire, most of you will be corrupted, right? Most of you will have no choice but to do X, Y, and Z, because that's empire is powerful like that. But there's still something you can take and be like, that part is not moving. That part is not going to be under that allegiance, right? So that's what he's doing. He's taking that thing that's left, food. Everything else has been already under the power. Everything else has been compromised. But he's going to say, I'm going to take one thing and you're not going to touch that. And I'm going to stay faithful to that. That's how he resists, right? It's very imperfect. It's not even effective. Doesn't change the empire. He's not trying to fight against the empire. He's trying to protect his identity or protect his integrity. That's how you fight against empire. It's not about, doing demonstrations, trying to, change the president or whatever, right? You can't do that. Empire is too strong. It's about preserving something and not letting empire into that, right? Yes.
I was gonna say, what you're saying reminds me of something that I covered in my Hebrew language class. Sometimes my professor will go into a tangent and we go over like Jewish history. So one of the things he was mentioning was like when Egypt was enslaved, no, when Israel was enslaved to Egypt, how three things that they kept so that they could keep their identity as, Hebrew Israelites was their names, the clothes that they wore to represent their well, clothes that they wore, and I forgot what the third thing is, but
Good. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Right.
It's their language.
The language.
They have
Very
the
good.
language, yeah.
Right. So what can we preserve? Right. There's everything else is already corrupt. Is there something that we can preserve so we can maintain that core? Right. It's a protection of the inner core that they're doing here. Right. And an affirmation of allegiance. Good. All right. So I'm gonna stop the recording for those of you who need to go. Next time, please. We're already in Revelation 13. Of course, you read the whole book of Revelation. If you miss this reading assignment, you do it, you hand it in to me next time. And next time, please do a reading assignment on Revelation 13, having read the whole book, otherwise it's going to be incoherent. So you must have read the whole book, and then we're going to focus on Revelation 13. All right, y'all, I'll see you later.